Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and part 5 and the final part of my best designed 30 caliber cartridge series. Stay tuned. All right, there's the final four. 300 WSM won that bracket. 300 PRC won that bracket. 300 Weatherby won that bracket. And the 308 Winchester won that bracket. And here we go. All right, so you saw all the cartridges we started with and how we narrowed it down to these four, the final four. If you notice, there's two that are short action. There's two that are Magnum length action. Kind of interesting, you know, how that went. And there was no standard length action. So let me give two honorable mentions to standard length actions that are fantastic and just didn't quite make the final four. The 30-06 and the 30 Nosler. I believe both of them are just as capable and just as good of a design as these top four, but they didn't quite make it. But the top four, I believe, are some of the best ever designed in that 30 caliber cartridge. All right, so where do we go from here? This is pretty tough. Neither one of these two matchups seemed obvious to me who the winner should be. So it wasn't like I just knew ahead of time, it's obviously going to be this one. I didn't know. I really didn't know. And even as I'm saying this, I'm not confident that I'm making the right choice. But the real answer between these four, the 300 Weatherby, the 300 PRC, the 300 Winchester Short Magnum, and the 308 Winchester. The real answer is they're all four probably equally as well designed and good for particular applications, for particular people, depending on what you're looking for in a cartridge. But that's not fun. No one wants to hear that answer, so I'm gonna break it down and give you my answer. So before I get into the two matchups, I'm gonna take a step back and just look at all four of the finalists together as a group. So some things that I look for in design, not in any particular order, but I'll just throw it out there. I like a neck that's long enough to be the diameter of that caliber and not a really short neck. I just don't think that's a good design, just me personally. And so in this case, I would want a neck around 308 inches, 0.308 inches. And all four of these have that. The WSM has a 298. It's just short, but it's basically there. The other two are right there. And then the Weatherby is actually a little bit longer than that, but they all have basically very similar neck length. So that's not really an issue at all. I do agree with P.O. Ackley and Weatherby and other people who have tried to improve cartridges that taking some of the taper out of the cartridge is a good thing. I don't really prefer a lot of taper like in the 300 H&H or the 22-250. It's just not what I consider to be a good design unless you're going for smooth feeding and that's really all you care about, then maybe. But I'm not a big fan of the extreme taper. All four of these have extremely minimal taper. Even the 308 has virtually no taper. I mean, they're all very straight from the base to the shoulder is very little taper. There's really nothing to be said there. I think they all four fit into their actions really well. So I think the 308 and the 300 WSM both fit into a short action very well without really any issues. Unless you're shooting like 200 to 220 grain bullets, it can do it, of course. It has the twist rate to accomplish it. But you're going to have to push that bullet in the case quite a bit, losing some case capacity. So very heavy bullets is a little bit of an issue, but really I think they both fit into the short action just fine. And I think that the Weatherby and the PRC take advantage of their Magnum length actions, however, in different ways. But I don't really see any negative flaws in anything to do with fitting into their action. When it comes to efficiency, it's the law of diminishing returns. Usually the smaller the amount of powder being used, the more efficient the cartridge is. There are some other factors involved, but in this case, a 308 is the most efficient. It's getting the most velocity for the powder it's using. WSM is very close though. It uses a lot more powder than the 308, but it's getting a lot more velocity, and it is very efficient. And then efficiency when it comes to the 300 Weatherby or the 300 PRC, I don't really see anything that jumps out to me that says one is more efficient than the other. But just the law of diminishing returns, you have a little bit more case capacity in the Weatherby, so it's probably not quite as efficient, but I really don't see any difference. I don't really see anything to talk about there. I do like efficiency, but because the 308's more efficient than the 300 WSM, does that make it better? No. Does that make it a better design? No. So it really has no effect. It has an effect, but it's a very small effect. What about velocity? Obviously the 300 WSM is going to get a lot more velocity than the 308. When it comes to the 300 PRC and the 300 Weatherby Magnum, I think it's really going to be, I think people's going to have answers all over the board. It's going to depend on what reloading manual that you look at. It's going to depend on how you, if you're a hand loader, how you have hand loaded. I'm sure there can be someone that says you can get more out of the 300 PRC. I'm sure there's someone going to say you can get more out of the 300 Weatherby. I don't actually know. I would say, just all things being equal, the 300 Weatherby is probably going to have a little bit more potential for velocity, and probably with all things being equal, it will probably send the same bullet going just a little bit faster. The case on the 300 Weatherby is a little bit more narrow. It's not quite as wide as the PRC. The PRC basically is as wide as the belt is on the 300 Weatherby. So if you took off the belt and bumped it out to the width of that belt all the way down, that would be the same width as the PRC. So in width-wise, PRC has a little bit more volume for case capacity. However, the length of the case is much longer with the Weatherby. Even though the cartridge overall length is about the same, that possibly even longer with the 300 PRC, depending on the action length and all that, and the magazine length. But as far as the cases go, the 300 Weatherby has like a 1/4 inch longer case. So from the base to the shoulder, you know, before you start the shoulder angle, just that part of the case, it's a 1/4 inch longer on the Weatherby. So even though it's not quite as wide, a 1/4 inch of case capacity is quite a bit. So probably there's a little bit of an edge on case capacity to the Weatherby, which is going to make it, generally speaking, shoot it a little bit faster. Now the PRC, you know, is a shorter case, but yet a longer overall length. So even the heaviest bullets are not going to protrude down into the case, taking away case capacity. So that could be an advantage in the heaviest bullets compared to the Weatherby. However, the Weatherby is a Magnum length action with a long neck, so it's not really going to be a big difference there. I guess what I'm trying to say is this is extremely close, and it's just really going to come down to my opinion and what I like better. I could use availability to break the tie, but with the PRC, it's pretty new, and the Weatherby's, even though it's popular, it's still kind of a niche brand, and you know, so I don't think availability can even break the tie. So it's really just going to come down to my opinion, and it's a tough call. I have really grown to like the Weatherby since I started my YouTube channel and started watching other gun tubers, as they're called, like Reloading Weatherby. Just hearing some of the stories and and the velocity he's got and the experience that he's got, I've really come to like the 300 Weatherby a lot more than I once did. But when it comes to design and personal preference, I don't like the belt. I don't like the belt. Does it have any effect on accuracy? I would say no. Is it hurting anything? There are a few things some pros and cons to the belt, really. It's mainly cons. But generally speaking, no, it doesn't hurt anything. It has no effect. And many people have commented in previous videos about how great of an accuracy that they get, and there's just no issue. So it's a nitpicky thing for me, but the belt is really having no negative effect. It's just a design flaw, in my opinion. When two cartridges are this close, you have to find something to break the tie. And I just don't like a belt being on there that has literally no reason for being there. It's not head spacing off the belt. It's just there because the parent case is a 300 H&H. Nothing wrong with it. It doesn't affect accuracy. I just don't like it if I'm going to be very nitpicky. And the PRC has more versatility. Because of that 1 in 8 twist, that very tall head height, and just being designed from the beginning to shoot the heaviest bullets, it has more of a versatile package that it offers. So I'm leaning toward the PRC, but in all honesty, if you're not planning on shooting the heaviest 30 caliber bullets, you might not want the PRC. But let's just drop down to a 165 grain bullet. Which is going to go faster? 165, 168 grain bullet out of the 300 Weatherby is probably going around 3,400 max. And out of the 300 PRC, it's probably going around 3,300, maybe a little more max. It's going to be close. And if they both have a 24-inch barrel, it's going to be very close. But I'd still give the edge to the Weatherby. But, the PRC is going to do just as good, or really close. It might be 100 feet per second slower than the Weatherby, especially on those lighter bullets. But it's really going to do just fine. It's going to do just fine with the lighter bullets. But it's literally going to shoot bullets the Weatherby can't shoot. Not because there's not room in there is, but because of the twist rate. It more than likely will not stabilize the heaviest bullets. So the PRC is just a little bit more versatile. So it's very close, but I'm going to give the win to the 300 PRC. Now I'm going to focus on the other finalists, the other semifinals, the 308 and the 300 WSM. It's very, very close. It really is. It's just what you're looking for, The biggest difference, which I haven't really talked about this, but they have all four of these cartridges have different shoulders. The 300 PRC had a 30-degree shoulder angle. The Weatherby has the Venturi shoulder. The 308 has a 20-degree shoulder angle. And then the 300 WSM has a 35-degree shoulder angle. What does that mean? It's just a design style that they went with. It seems to be in our modern day that everyone's going with a 30-degree shoulder angle, and they feel like they've kind of found a sweet spot there, and that's just the perfect shoulder angle. That could be, that might not be. I'm not sure. With the WSM, it's a 35-degree shoulder angle, very similar to the 40-degree shoulder angle in the Ackley Improves. And they're literally made to just give you more case capacity. So you're just going to have a little bit more case capacity in that WSM. And back in the 50s, when the 308 came out, the 30-06 has a 17-degree shoulder angle. Steep shoulder angles just weren't really a thing except for in Wildcat cartridges, like we just talked about with the Ackley Improved. So there was some, 30-degree shoulder angles and things, but for the most part, the shoulder angle wasn't a big thing, and they just went with a 20-degree shoulder angle, which is a little steeper than the 30-06. Does that harm it in any way? No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. If you did bump out the shoulder on the 308 to, say, a 35-degree shoulder angle, or even a 40, or even a 30, you would get a little bit more case capacity, but we're really talking about a very small amount of case capacity. So going back to those 165 grain bullets, out of a 308, you're going to max out at around 2,900 feet per second. 165 grain bullet out of a 300 WSM is probably going to max out around 32, 3250, maybe more, but let's just say 200 to 300 feet per second faster than the 308. The 308 was designed to be very efficient and get similar performance as a 30-06, but in a more efficient, shorter package with lighter weight ammunition in a shorter, lighter weight gun. So it's not trying to be as fast, okay? When you embrace that and you accept it and you understand it, you don't need a 26-inch barrel or a 28-inch barrel in a 308 to get more velocity. If you wanted more velocity, just go with a different cartridge. Go with a 300 WSM or something. So the thing about the 308 and its design is a shorter barrel, is a little bit less velocity, but still good velocity and very efficient and very accurate. And like we touched upon before, the 300 WSM is just a more efficient, shorter version of a 300 Win Mag. And unless you're shooting the heaviest bullets, you're going to get pretty much the same performance with less powder. Of the 308 and the 300 WSM, which is more versatile? Which cartridge is more versatile? I mean, same caliber, same twist rate. Could one be more versatile than the other one? I think so. I think the WSM is slightly more versatile, only because you can load it down. If you want to reduce the powder and you want to shoot, a bullet at 308 speeds, you can do that, and it's going to recoil a little bit less. You can also do that in the 308, but you're not going to want to, but you cannot go up anymore. It's limited in its capacity. And so with any bigger case, you can load it down, of course, and you can't get bigger with a 308. So there is a little bit more versatility there. And one thing the 300 WSM has over the PRC and the Weatherby as far as loading it down is that because you can load any of them down, but there's a lot of empty space in those bigger cases when you do that. In the WSM, when you load it down, it's still relatively full because the case wasn't as big to begin with and shorter. Therefore, it seems to be a very good cartridge to load down if you would desire to do that. So you can load it down and it will be similar to a 30-06 or a 308, or you can load it to its potential and it matches a 300 Win Mag. So it is slightly more versatile than the 308. But like I said, the 308 is slightly more efficient. Not by a lot, but it is slightly more efficient. You're really getting a very efficient cartridge. Both cartridges are ideal, I would say, for lightweight hunting, hiking guns where you're going to have a backpack and you just want something lightweight. Both cartridges are ideal for that. 308 maybe slightly more because you're probably going to have a 22 or 20-inch barrel on a 308. And you're probably going to have a 24-inch barrel on the WSM if you're looking to match the Win Mag's performance. You could cut it down, of course, but if you're cutting down a WSM, maybe you should just get a 308. So anyway, but both would be ideal for that. But with a 308, going down to 20 inches or 22, it just seems more ideal for carrying a rifle for long distances while hunting. One advantage I can see with the 300 WSM is just distance to ethically hunt. So you're shooting the same bullet, right, out of both. Let's say you're on a hunt in any continent, it doesn't really matter. And it's a lightweight gun, you've got it on your back, you're glassing for animals. When you find the animal, you're trying to stalk. Of course, you want to get as close as you can, but in the two scenarios, you definitely would have an advantage in distance with the 300 WSM. It coming out of the muzzle faster, having higher muzzle velocity because of having more powder to burn at the beginning in a case that affords that will mean that it's going to hold or have more velocity and energy a little bit further downrange. So you can extend your hunting range a little bit further than with a 308. It's not to say that one would be more accurate than the other at long ranges, or one couldn't hit the animal at long ranges, but if you're going to shoot at longer distances, 400 or 500 yards, you definitely want to have as much energy and much velocity as possible. So you would have more of a hunting range with the 300 WSM. Once again, if it's about availability, the 308 destroys every cartridge on this whole tournament because it is the most popular. It is the most available. But that's not what it's about. It's about its design. And if it's got a great design, it's in the Final Four. But so does the WSM. As you know, I consider the 308 to be the perfect whitetail deer cartridge for the areas that I hunt in. For Missouri, for the woods, an occasional hayfield shot, I think a 308 is just about perfect. A 30-06 would be right there with it. 270 would be just as good if you had a little bit longer shots, a little bit flatter shooting, but any one of those three I consider to be just about the perfect rifle cartridge for whitetail deer in Missouri where I live. And I personally have a 308 and I love it. And I've killed more deer with a 308 than any other cartridge. So I think a lot of people, like I said, are going to go with that cartridge. But I'm going to give it to the 300 WSM. I just feel like it's more versatile. I think having more case capacity, but you can still load it down, but just having more distance, potential hunting, but you can still hunt, you can still use it for short distance. It's just a little bit more versatile than the 308. And the 300 PRC, with the bullet weight difference and all that, is just a little bit more versatile than the 300 Weatherby. So I'm sure you've noticed this has been very tough for me. It's been a hard call and it's pretty tough, but I'm going to break it down to the championship round. The two best designed 30 caliber cartridges of all time so far, the 300 WSM and the 300 PRC. Who is the champion? Wow, this is tough. This is really tough. Both have all the design things that I like. They're both efficient, slight edge going to the WSM. They're both versatile with an edge going to the PRC. They're both really touted to use a 24-inch barrel. I think a lot of people would rather have a 26-inch barrel in the PRC, but really Hornady's touting it as, you know, it's just fine with a 24-inch barrel. So we'll just go with a 24-inch barrel. So the only difference in rifle is going to be just the difference in length between Magnum and short, which is, you know, a legitimate difference. It's a little over half an inch probably difference, but that's, I mean, is it a big deal? If you want the Magnum length, you don't care that it's a half inch longer than the short action. If you do like the short action, that might be something that you say, hey, I'm glad I have a little bit shorter bolt stroke, but I mean, is it that big of a deal? A half an inch of steel and wood, I guess, will be slightly lighter, but it really means nothing. You're going to be able to shoot heavier bullets with a 300 PRC, for sure. You will have a little bit more velocity. So shooting the same bullet, say 180 grain bullet, you're going to get probably 100 feet per second faster with the 300 PRC. However, you will use a legitimate amount more powder to get there, so it won't be as efficient as the WSM, but it will be faster with the same bullet. But that only means you're going to have more recoil. So I guess you've got PRC and WSM. PRC is more versatile, WSM is more efficient, PRC has more speed, WSM will have a little bit less recoil. It's all evening out. So we've talked about all these PRC and Creedmoor cartridges that have these very tight tolerances, and they're literally have match grade chambers basically, and they're designed to be accurate. And so that's a big plus. However, currently in the month of March in 2023, the tightest group in the world, as far as I know, was shot with a 300 WSM. Obviously, it was a custom gun. You get a factory WSM versus a factory PRC, you're probably going to have a better chamber in the PRC, but we're talking just barely. But, I mean, with the world record being owned by the WSM, it seems like a pretty tough call to say one's going to be inherently more accurate than the other. I'd give that a wash as well. I guess we can talk about barrel life. It's reported, you know, that the WSM is going to get around 2,500 rounds in barrel life. I could see that being less than that. I could see it being more. I could see it being 25, 3,000, even more. I feel like that's more of like the 3,000 to 4,000 is more of like 30-06 territory. So I'd say 2,500 is probably a good number, but obviously it depends on a lot of things: how you shoot it, how you treat it, and what kind of loads that you're shooting through and how hot they are. With the PRC, obviously it's a very new cartridge. The things I've read is probably 1,500 to 2,000. So yeah, you're going to get a slightly better barrel life potentially out of the 300 WSM. I'm kind of at a loss here, guys. I just don't think there's a way to pick one. They just seem so good, but they're obviously different, but I don't see that their differences outweigh the other ones. You know, their strengths and weaknesses just kind of balance each other out. I would default to availability, but like I said, WSM is not that popular, though I think it's getting more popular. 300 PRC is popular, but it's still fairly new, and so it's not as mainstream as it could be. And so probably in 10 to 15 years, I think the PRC will become a lot more popular than it is. However, the WSM seems to me to be it's the only one of the WSMs that continues to be more popular. So I can't really use availability to break the tie. Both cartridges have a very similar max pressure. I do believe the PRC is a little higher. I believe it's 65,000 with the WSM being like in the 63 to 64 range. If you're hand loading, it's really not going to matter. Both cases are very stout, very strong, and you can easily get max pressure on both cases. In fact, you can go slightly beyond that. I wish I had more experience from people that had shot the lighter bullets in the PRC. Obviously, all these Hornady cartridges shoot great. I just wonder, with it being literally designed for those heaviest bullets, how does it shoot the lighter bullets? Because, you know, when a cartridge is designed for like the 200 to 250 grain bullet, what if you put a 150 grain bullet in it? How is it going to shoot that? It could shoot it lights out. I don't know. I just wish I had more experience on that. I wish I had more people telling me that have used it, you know, how well it shoots those lighter bullets. All right, I have made a decision. I've rambled on long enough. This is the closest thing I've probably ever done. I just don't know the answer to this. I might change my mind tomorrow. It's like if I gave the winner 100 out of 100 points, then the loser would have like 99 out of 100. It's just that close. I'm going to give it to the 300 WSM, the 300 Winchester Short Magnum. It's not quite as versatile. It's slightly more efficient. And that's how I'm going to break the tie, just because as a subjective personal opinion, I like efficient cartridges. It's more suited for the bullet weights that I'm going to be using. I'm going to be shooting 130 to 165 grain bullet, sometimes 180 grain bullet, that class out of a 30 caliber generally speaking. So it calls out to me more than shooting like a 225 grain bullet or bigger out of a PRC. You know, and I hunt whitetail deer, and it would be much more logical for me to have the WSM shooting 150 to 180 grain bullets for whitetail deer than to be using a PRC, you know. And like I said, I don't know how well they shoot the lighter bullets. They probably shoot them just fine. But now if I lived out west and I was an elk hunter and I had longer shots on bigger game like elk, I probably would go with the PRC. It's just giving you that added versatility of the heavier bullets would just be better at those longer ranges. I don't know. I'm sure I've made some people upset, but it's a very tough call. It's like number 1 and number 1A. They're so close, but I'm going to give it to the 300 WSM. I'm sure some people agree. I'm sure some people disagree. Please leave it in the comments below. Really had a good time doing this series. It was fun to think about, fun to produce. And so if there's another caliber you would like me to look at next, please leave it in the comments. I'd be happy to do that. Like the video if you've liked it or this series. And please subscribe if you haven't done that. Check the link in the description below. I've got several links actually for a few different things I got going on, Instagram and Twitter and my email and different things. So check that out. We'll just leave it there. Hope you have a wonderful day. And until next time, take care.